The 1970s gave us some of the most magnetic, larger-than-life musical talents the world has ever seen. Their voices, their guitar riffs, their raw energy. It all felt like it would last forever. But for some of them, forever came far too soon. These are 10 beloved music icons from the 1970s who tragically passed away. Number 10. Duane Allman, the Allman Brothers Band. If you followed rock music in the early 1970s, you already know what it felt like to hear Duane Allman play slide guitar for the first time. There was something almost otherworldly about it, like he had figured out a language the rest of us were still trying to learn. Born Howard Duane Allman in Nashville, Tennessee in 1946, Duane co-founded the Allman Brothers Band in 1969, alongside his younger brother Greg. The band quickly became one of the defining acts of Southern rock, blending blues, jazz, and country into something entirely their own. Their landmark live album at Fillmore East, recorded in March 1971, is still widely regarded as one of the greatest live albums in rock history. Duane's guitar work on it, especially his extended improvisations, was breathtaking. But beyond the Allman Brothers, Duane was also one of the most in-demand session guitarists of his era. He played on recordings with Wilson Pickett, Aretha Franklin, and most famously, Eric Clapton. Clapton was so taken with Duane's talent that he invited him to play on the Derek and the Dominoes album, Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs, released in late 1970. That record, and Duane's contribution to it, became the stuff of legend. On October 29, 1971, Duane Allman was riding his motorcycle in Macon, Georgia, when a flatbed truck ahead of him slowed to make a turn. He swerved to avoid it, lost control, and was thrown from the bike. He was just 24 years old. Despite the efforts of doctors at the hospital, he died from his injuries that same day. The music world was stunned. Duane had been at the absolute peak of his powers. His brother Greg would carry the band forward, but the void left by Duane's guitar, that singular, aching tone, was one that no one could fill. What he might have gone on to create in the decades that followed is something rock fans still quietly wonder about. Number 9. Jim Croce. There are some artists whose music feels like a warm memory the moment you hear it, like a summer evening. You somehow never want to end. Jim Croce was one of those artists. Born in Philadelphia in 1943, Jim spent years playing in bars and small clubs, barely scraping by, before he finally broke through in the early 1970s. In 1972, operator That's Not the Way It Feels introduced him to a wider audience, but it was Bad Leroy Brown in 1973 that turned him into a household name. The song hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in July of that year, and suddenly, everything Jim had worked for was coming together. I've got a song. He had a gift for storytelling that felt effortless. His songs were full of real people, drifters, dreamers, working men, and heartbroken lovers. And they landed with a warmth that made listeners feel like they were hearing stories from a close friend. There was a directness to his writing that was rare, and a humanity that drew people in regardless of age or background. His follow-up hit, I Got a Name, reinforced just how exceptional his voice and pen were. Both songs demonstrated a range that suggested he was only getting started, that the best chapters of his career were still ahead of him. Tragically, on September 20th, 1973, just 5 months after Bad Leroy Brown reached number 1, Jim Croce was killed in a plane crash near Natchitoches, Louisiana. He was 30 years old. The small chartered plane he was traveling in struck a tree during takeoff. Everyone on board perished. He left behind a wife, Ingrid, and a young son, A.J. Croce, who would go on to become a musician himself. Jim never got to see what the rest of his career might have looked like, but the music he left behind, warm, human, and timeless, has never really faded.
Have to be a super guy, oh, maybe a super...
Number 8. Gram Parsons. Not everyone knew Gram Parsons by name during his lifetime, but the musicians who did, especially those in the country and rock worlds, spoke about him with a kind of reverence you don't often hear. Born Cecil Ingram Connor III. In 1946 in Winter Haven, Florida, Gram Parsons had a difficult childhood marked by family tragedy, but music became his anchor early on. By the late 1960s, he had already made his mark with the International Submarine Band, and then briefly with the Byrds, helping shape the sound of what would become country rock. His work on the Byrds' Sweetheart of the Rodeo album in 1968 helped bridge Nashville and the counterculture in a way no one had quite done before. In the early 1970s, he released 2 solo albums, GP in 1973 and Grievous Angel in 1974, that are now considered masterpieces of the genre. He also formed a close musical partnership with Emmylou Harris, whose career he helped launch. Together, their harmonies were something rare and beautiful. But Gram struggled deeply with drug and alcohol addiction throughout his life. On September 19, 1973, just one day before Jim Croce's fatal crash, Gram Parsons died of a drug overdose at the Joshua Tree Inn in California. He was 26 years old. His death robbed country rock of its most visionary pioneer at a time when he still had so much left to say. His influence, though, proved enormous. Artists from Eagles to Elvis Costello to Wilco have cited him as a foundational figure, and his legacy has only grown stronger with every passing decade. Number 7. Ronnie Van Zant, Lynyrd Skynyrd. Southern rock had its poets, and Ronnie Van Zant was chief among them. As the lead singer and primary songwriter of Lynyrd Skynyrd, he had a way of writing about the American South, its pride, its contradictions, its grit, that felt honest and unvarnished in a way most pop music never dared to be. Born Ronald Wayne Van Zant in Jacksonville, Florida in 1948, Ronnie formed Lynyrd Skynyrd in the late 1960s, with several friends from the same neighborhood. By 1973, the band had signed with MCA Records and released their debut album, pronounced Lay Nerd Skin Nerd. Their ascent through the mid-1970s was rapid and well-deserved. Songs like Sweet Home Alabama and Freebird became anthems, not just for Southern rock fans, but for rock audiences worldwide. Ronnie was the soul of that band. On stage, he performed barefoot, commanding the stage with a raw, natural authority. Off stage, he took the music seriously, and it showed in the way Lynyrd Skynyrd's catalog grew deeper and more ambitious with each passing year. By 1977, they were one of the biggest rock acts in the world. On October 20th, 1977, the band's chartered plane ran out of fuel mid-flight between Greenville, South Carolina, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The aircraft crash-landed in a swampy, wooded area near Gillsburg, Mississippi. Ronnie Van Zant was killed in the crash, along with guitarist Steve Gaines, backup singer Cassie Gaines, and several others. He was 29 years old. The crash devastated the band and their fans. Lynyrd Skynyrd would eventually reform years later with Ronnie's younger brother Johnny on vocals, but nothing could replace what was lost on that October night. Number 6. Marc Bolan, T-Rex. In the early 1970s, if you were anywhere near a radio in Britain, or paying attention to what was happening in pop music on either side of the Atlantic, you knew Marc Bolan. He was glam rock personified, corkscrew curls, glitter on his cheekbones, and an electric guitar he played with a looseness and swagger that made everything look easy. Born Marc Feld in Hackney, London in 1947, Marc Bolan had been making music since the mid-1960s under a variety of styles. But it was the transformation of his band Tyrannosaurus Rex into the abbreviated T-Rex around 1970 that changed everything. Songs like Get It On, Telegram Sam, and 20th Century Boy made him one of the biggest pop stars in the world, particularly in the UK, where Bolan mania rivaled Beatlemania in its intensity. He was also one of the first artists to embrace what would become glam rock: the theatrical makeup, the sequined jackets, the unapologetic showmanship, paving the way for David Bowie, Queen, and so many others who came after. By the mid-1970s, his commercial peak had passed, but Bolan was in the middle of a genuine creative and personal comeback. He had lost weight, cleaned up his lifestyle, recorded new material, and was hosting his own television show, Marc, in Britain. It seemed like a genuine second act was underway. On September 16, 1977, just 2 weeks before his 30th birthday, Marc Bolan was killed when the car he was traveling in, driven by his partner, singer Gloria Jones, crossed a small humpback bridge near Barnes, London, struck a fence post, and then hit a tree. He had never learned to drive and was in the passenger seat. Jones survived with injuries, but Marc Bolan died at the scene. The outpouring of grief in Britain was enormous. He had been such a vivid, joyful presence and was so close to recapturing what had made him a star that the loss felt especially cruel. Number 5. Keith Moon, The Who. There has never been a drummer quite like Keith Moon, and there probably never will be again. He didn't just keep time, he exploded it, redefined it, turned the drum kit into something that sounded like it was simultaneously falling apart and building something magnificent. Born in Wembley, Middlesex in 1946, Keith Moon joined The Who in 1964 as a teenager, and from that point forward, the band's sound was inseparable from his playing. Albums like Who's Next in 1971 and Quadrophenia in 1973 are counted among the greatest rock records ever made, and Moon's drumming on both is nothing short of extraordinary. Offstage, Keith Moon was famous for his wild personality. Stories of hotel room demolitions, outrageous pranks, and extravagant antics filled the music press for years. He was the kind of person who seemed to fill whatever room he walked into. And the stories about him, many of them quite unbelievable, were more often than not entirely true. But behind the larger-than-life persona was a man who struggled deeply, with alcohol, with the pressures of fame, and with a profound loneliness that the chaos of his lifestyle seemed to mask, but never cure. By the late 1970s, his health had seriously deteriorated. On September 7, 1978, just weeks after The Who released their album Who Are You?, Keith Moon was found dead in his London flat. He had taken a large number of Heminevrin tablets, a medication prescribed to help him manage alcohol withdrawal, and died of an accidental overdose. He was 32 years old. The rock world lost not just one of its most talented musicians, but one of its most genuinely irreplaceable personalities. The Who carried on. But as anyone who loved that band will tell you, it was never quite the same. Number 4. Elvis Presley. There is almost no one in the history of popular music who changed more, influenced more, or meant more to more people than Elvis Aaron Presley. The king of rock and roll was born on January 8, 1935, in Tupelo, Mississippi, and by the mid-1950s, he had already altered the course of American music forever. But by the 1970s, Elvis was operating in a different mode. The films were behind him. The live performances were everything. Starting in 1969, he mounted one of the most remarkable concert comebacks in show business history, playing to sold-out audiences in Las Vegas and on national tours. He performed over 500 concerts between 1969 and 1977, and his live shows became legendary for their scale and spectacle.
I still see suspicion in your eyes.
Yet behind the stage costumes and the roaring crowds, Elvis was in serious trouble. His health had been declining for years. He was dependent on a large number of prescription medications, sleeping pills, stimulants, painkillers, prescribed by physicians who seemed more interested in keeping him functioning as a performer than in treating him as a patient. His weight had fluctuated dramatically, and those closest to him were deeply worried. On August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley was found unresponsive at his Graceland estate in Memphis by his girlfriend, Ginger Alden. He was pronounced dead at Baptist Memorial Hospital that afternoon. He was 42 years old. The official cause was cardiac arrhythmia, though the role of long-term prescription drug use has been widely discussed in the years since. The news of his death spread across the world within hours. People wept in the streets. Radio stations played his records through the night. Whatever complicated feelings the public may have carried about his final years, what Elvis had meant to rock and roll, to country, to gospel, to the entire fabric of American music was beyond measure.
If I can falling.
Number 3. Sandy Denny. Sandy Denny may not be as immediately recognizable a name as some of the others on this list, but to those who knew her music, the loss was every bit as profound. Born Alexandra Eileen McLean Denny in Merton, London in 1947, Sandy came up through the British folk revival of the late 1960s and became the lead singer of Fairport Convention, the band most responsible for fusing English folk music with rock instrumentation. Her voice was one of the most remarkable in British music, a rich, clear, deeply emotional contralto that seemed capable of carrying centuries of feeling. She left Fairport Convention in 1969 to form her own group, Fotheringay, and later released a series of solo albums throughout the early 1970s. The North Star Grassmen and the Ravens, 1971, Sandy, 1972, Like an Old-Fashioned Waltz, 1974, and Rendezvous, 1977, each one revealing new dimensions of her extraordinary talent. She also holds the distinction of being the only guest vocalist ever to appear on a Led Zeppelin studio recording, contributing her voice to the Battle of Evermore on the band's fourth album in 1971. By the mid-1970s, Sandy was battling depression and a serious dependency on alcohol. In April 1978, she fell down a flight of stairs at a friend's house in London and suffered a fatal brain hemorrhage. She died in hospital on April 21, 1978. She was 31 years old. She left behind a daughter, Georgia, who was less than 2 years old at the time. Among those who knew her work best, musicians, critics, and devoted fans, Sandy Denny has long been regarded as one of the finest British vocalists of the 20th century.
I wonder if they flew one day.
Number 2. Bob Marley.
I've no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none.
In the history of popular music, very few artists have transcended their genre the way Bob Marley did. He didn't just make reggae famous, he made it a worldwide language, carrying messages of love, resilience, and liberation to every corner of the planet. Born Nesta Robert Marley on February 6, 1945, in 9 Mile, St. Anne, Jamaica, Bob grew up in poverty and found his voice in the Kingston music scene of the 1960s. By the early 1970s, working with his band The Wailers and producer Chris Blackwell at Island Records, he was releasing albums Catch a Fire, Burnin', Natty Dread, Rastaman Vibration, Exodus, that built one of the most remarkable bodies of work in modern music. Exodus, released in 1977, was later named Album of the Century by Time magazine. His message was inseparable from his music. The Rastafarian faith, the call for unity among oppressed people everywhere, the warm defiance in his voice. It all came together in a way that moved people regardless of where they came from or what language they spoke. In the summer of 1977, while playing soccer with friends, Bob injured the toenail on his right big toe. A dark spot beneath the nail refused to heal, When he finally sought medical attention, he was diagnosed with acral lentiginous melanoma, a rare and aggressive form of skin cancer. Doctors advised amputation of the toe to stop the cancer from spreading. He refused, in part due to his Rastafarian beliefs. On September 21, 1980, Bob Marley collapsed while jogging in New York's Central Park. He was rushed to hospital, where doctors confirmed the cancer had spread to his brain. 2 days later, gravely ill but determined, he took the stage anyway for what would be his final concert in Pittsburgh on September 23, 1980. After that show, his condition made further performing impossible, and he was flown to a specialist clinic in Bavaria, Germany, where he received treatment for several months. He died on May 11, 1981, in Miami, Florida, while en route home to Jamaica. He was 36 years old. He was buried in his birthplace of 9 Mile, Jamaica, with his guitar and a soccer ball. The world he left behind was measurably better and more musical for his having been in it. Decades on, his image still appears on walls in cities across the world. His music still drifts from open windows, and his words still carry the same weight they did the day he first sang them. Very few artists in any era have managed that kind of permanence. Number 1. John Lennon.
Imagine all the people.
There is no easy way to talk about the death of John Lennon. Even now, more than 4 decades later, it carries a weight that's hard to fully articulate. Born John Winston Lennon on October 9, 1940, in Liverpool, England, John co-founded the Beatles in the late 1950s, alongside Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr. What that band went on to accomplish, culturally, musically, historically, remains, by almost any measure, unparalleled in the history of popular music. After the Beatles dissolved in 1970, John launched a solo career that, at its best, was staggering in its ambition and emotional honesty. Plastic Ono Band in 1970 and Imagine in 1971 were both defining records, not just of his career, but of that entire era. He was also a vocal peace activist, using his fame to protest the Vietnam War and speak out for human rights in ways that made him a target of government surveillance and a beloved figure to millions around the world. By the mid-1970s, John had largely stepped back from public life. He and Yoko Ono had moved to the Dakota, an apartment building on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and he devoted himself to raising their son Sean, who was born in 1975. For 5 years, he was largely absent from the music industry, and content to be so. In the autumn of 1980, he and Yoko returned with a new album, Double Fantasy. It felt like a genuine homecoming. The album was full of warmth and optimism, a portrait of a man who had found peace in domesticity and was ready to share that with the world again. On the evening of December 8, 1980, John Lennon and Yoko Ono returned to the Dakota after a recording session. As they approached the building's entrance, Mark David Chapman, a troubled fan who had been waiting outside earlier that day and had received John's autograph, stepped forward and shot John 4 times in the back. John Lennon was rushed to Roosevelt Hospital. He was pronounced dead on arrival. He was 40 years old. The grief that followed was genuinely global. Candlelight vigils were held in New York's Central Park, where the Strawberry Fields Memorial now stands, and in cities around the world. Radio stations in dozens of countries went to all Lennon programming through the night. People who had grown up with the Beatles, who had carried John's voice and words through their own lives, felt a loss that went far beyond music. What he had already given was enormous. What he might still have had to say is something we'll spend the rest of our lives wondering about.
Imagine all the people.
From the stages of the American South to the streets of Kingston, from the arenas of Britain to the Dakota Building in New York, these 10 artists shaped the sound of a decade and left marks on the world that time hasn't diminished at all. Their music is still here. Their voices are still here. And as long as people keep pressing play, in some very real way, so are they. If this video brought back some memories, or introduced you to a name you hadn't thought about in a while, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more where this came from, and we'd love to have you with us for all of it.